Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have another film to review in the Hellraiser franchise. Of course, I just finished up earlier today. I watched the 2002 Hellraiser Hellseeker, which is the 6th film in the franchise, direct-to-video. This one is the next direct-to-video release. Pretty much everything after this was as well, including technically if you go direct-to-streaming, the reboot will be as well that's coming out. This is, in this collection here, Hellraiser Deader. That's a really bad title. Hellraiser Deader, as in D-E-A-D-E-R. Not debt, as in like I'm in debt to the bank. Nothing like that. This film came out in 2005, 3 years after the previous movie. Now, Inferno was a weak title with a weak poster. Hellseeker is a great title with a really great poster. For my thumbnail, I posted that there with the red and black. I love it. And then you have this. Then you have this poster that is, that looks direct-to-video. The one that was on the thumbnail, you know, the red and black and the chains, and that looks like some Photoshop. Poor Doug Bradley. Poor Doug Bradley. Poor Doug Bradley. Anyway, this is the 7th film of this franchise. Again, the 3rd to go direct-to-video. And it is not beloved, as you could possibly tell. I myself do not consider this a beloved movie in my favorites of the franchise, even though I'm not really a fan of the franchise. I love one movie, and I have some certain moments in other movies that I like, and I have some movies I'm just fine with. And I think I'm in the area officially now of films that are below average for this particular movie. Hellraiser Deader has a bad poster, a bad title. It's trying so hard to do this post-punk type of thing, which is really weird for me. The main chick in this is essentially a very beautiful young woman who has this post-punk look. She wears like a leather jacket. She's basically a journalist of some sort who goes into these very risky situations to do some investigative reporting. And she just recently finished up an article that she wrote after experiencing hanging out in a crack house forever called, I think it was called, How to Become a Crack Whore. And when I read that newspaper headline in her article, I laughed so hard out loud about that. I couldn't resist. Anyway, How to Become a Crack Whore, aka Hellraiser Deader. Really rough movie. Not a complete loss of a movie. I do want to make that very clear. There are certain aspects here and there, and the concept, I think, is kind of neat. The execution is the problem. And typically isn't that always the case when I say and bring up that I really like the concept of something. That's typically the case for me for a lot of the Hellraiser movies. Most of them, for that matter, I typically think are a good idea with the wrong people behind it, or the wrong budget, or a low budget, or something like that. This film, to me, is even more low-budget feeling than the previous film, Hellseeker, that had the exact same director. I assume they lowered the budget on him. And oddly enough, this film came out in 2005, along with the next one that was the last one for a long time called Hellworld. They're all three, Hellseeker, Deader, and Hellworld, are all directed by Rick Botta, or Rick Botta, B-O-T-A. I don't know how to say his name, I'm sorry. I'm not good with names. He directed all three, and Hellseeker feels like it's completely from somebody else. I don't remember Hellworld. I remember it's like the worst to me in my brain. I don't know about right now after seeing Deader again. It took me all day long to watch this movie. I kept stopping and starting and going doing other things and then coming back. After watching this, this might be the worst. I don't know. I like aspects of it. It's not a complete loss. There are things that I like enough that it kind of raised it up a star for me, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Rick Botta directing these three, it's so bizarre to me because this film, if you don't happen to know, came out 3 months before the last, for a while, movie's Hellworld. This came out in June, and this other one, Hellworld, came out in, I think it was September, I think? Yeah, like a day away from being the exact same date 3 months apart. That's crazy to me. I assume they were shot back to back. Back then, they didn't have so much focus on extremely intelligent design on CGI and stuff. They didn't have so much of a focus on that, so you could get away with having cheap CGI on kind of a rough movie, if you will. And Deader is very rough, as you know. Rick Botta, like I said, it feels like a completely different film from a completely different director this time around, and from what I remember of Hellworld. I remember that one looking cheaper than this, which is hard to imagine if you got to this movie and haven't seen Hellworld yet, but I remember it being like that. I don't know, maybe I'll like Hellworld more. Henry Cavill is in that, you know, Superman. That's pretty cool. I can't wait to see that there. what is the story of this film? Well, after her crack whore article that I brought up, she talks to her editor, who tells her that he has a videotape he found from some kind of weird situation in London. Of course, this starts out in London, then it moves over to like Europe or Romania or whatever's what. And essentially, there is a videotape of a young woman who's apparently been part of a cult who are tinkering around with the puzzle box, the Lament configuration, the Lamerchants configuration, if you want to call it that. You know, the puzzle box from Hellraiser, because this is another one of those films that feels like it's written as its own standalone movie with some weird supernatural crime thriller drama stuff, and then they added in Pinhead to make another movie. That's what it feels like most of the time, just like the previous two and just like the one after it. I don't know about Revelations and Judgment, haven't seen Judgment, don't really remember Revelations well enough. As you guys know, I've said that numerous times throughout these reviews. I just like to restate it for anybody who doesn't know where I currently stand on those two. So, I like the journalist investigation stuff. Basically, she goes on a mission for her editor to go investigate this puzzle box thing and this cult that this young woman talked about in the videotape that she recorded of herself on some kind of camcorder. Again, this was 2005, not cell phones. She talked about a cult called the Debtors. Yeah. It's kind of a cool, interesting nickname for this kind of weird noir wannabe thriller. I think it's kind of cool to name the cult after that. You shouldn't have named the film after that, in my opinion. It shouldn't have been. It's a little weird for me. So she's supposed to go on this mission by her editor to go investigate the Debtors, to go investigate this young woman with the videotape, whether she's alive or dead. No one really knows. It's kind of interesting, and when she gets there, she finds some horrible things out in Romania about this poor woman. It ain't good. This Debtor cult, by the way, let's really talk about them for a little bit. They follow a guy who has long black hair, both ears are pierced, and he looks like a caricature of Clive Barker. It's kind of a cool throwback. Most people probably wouldn't pick up on that. A lot of people don't even know what Clive Barker looks like, even though he's all over the back of his books. I'm a big book fan of his, for the most part. And he looks just like Clive Barker, which is kind of a cool nod, but I almost don't know if it's like an insult or what. So, oh well, doesn't really matter. This movie's bad. No one cared enough to even say anything about that. I haven't heard anybody ever mention that until I watched it tonight. I saw that and I was like, wow. I don't know. I wonder if anybody else caught that. Put that down in the comments section down below if you caught that. Anyway, he is kind of a weird Christ-like Messiah type dude. Basically, he will convince people in this cult to kill themselves or to let him kill them, like stab them, hang them, whatever. And then he brings them back to life by some weird supernatural ability he has. And I believe it's hinted at that the Cenobites might have given that to him, or maybe it's like a black magic type of thing. I don't know. It's such a stupid, boring, convoluted movie. And I don't really understand it, I'll be honest with you. A lot of it gets so confusing and muddled by the end of this movie that I really can't follow it. The finale of the film, I don't entirely understand the main character's actions. This young, hot investigator girl, I don't really get what she does. I don't understand why she does what she does at the end of this movie. Pinhead and all that, their involvement, the Cenobite involvement, some of these being from the previous movies, mainly Hellseeker. Those particular motivations of those folks, what the hell? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they want to do what they're going to do or how they're involved, aside from just being nosy. Pinhead is nosy. He has a lot of points to that. You get it? You get my joke? It's a bad joke, but I made a joke about his pins in his head. Anyway, so it's unwatchable, almost, in my opinion. Like I said, it has moments here and there that I really like. One in particular involving a dead body in a bathroom. And I really like that. I thought that was very obvious what was going to happen, and it was kind of silly for that. The overall concept of this movie is a little too convoluted to not be goofy and silly, but moments like that made this film kind of thrive a little bit. And when I say thrive, I mean, you know, that 1 or 2 heartbeats left on the dying person's heart and on the monitor that's attached to them, or that they're attached to. Which one is it, if you're plugged in for something like that? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm making a lot of death jokes. There's a reason for that. Of course, it's a dead movie called Deader. It's such a weak movie. Up to this point, this might be the weakest of the films I've watched and reviewed, even though I've seen this many years ago. Like I said, a lot of these first 8, or first 9, I saw Revelations at one point. I saw all of these like almost 8 or 9 years ago, right before I met my wife and we started dating. I had an old channel I reviewed things on, and I talked about this there too, and I said about how weak it was, and I kind of went into this a little hesitant about how I was going to feel this time around. I stand by what I said then, even though that review's long gone. It's been deleted for a very long time. I ain't satisfied with this movie. It's a mess. The main girl in this movie tries to put in a decent performance. She really tries, but the writing isn't really there. The kind of snarkiness that her character should have by design, by the way she dresses, the kind of punk rock throwback nature, she should be more snarky. There should be a lot of other jokes and humor that would land more, whereas this feels more like a Saw movie. You know what I mean? I love Saw, don't get me wrong, I'm not insulting it that way. I love the Saw franchise, one of my favorite of all time, up there with Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play. It feels like it's trying to be something like that, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Saw came out the year before this. 2004, I think? I'm fairly certain 2004 was when Saw came out. This is probably already being made by that time, but you know what I mean. It seems to me like they're taking some influence from that kind of crime thriller mixed with a horror thing. Of course, this one's a little convoluted because of the supernatural stuff that I don't really get. The puzzle box is a little weird in how it's misplaced throughout this film. There are certain moments in Hellseeker, the previous movie that I reviewed, where it's constantly, and Inferno does this too, don't get me wrong, but I love Inferno. Hellseeker constantly does this thing where they fake you out constantly. No joke, this movie tries to do that too. It's not as frequent, but then when it does it, you feel like you wasted so much time, kind of like how you felt watching Hellseeker. You could be watching something go on so boring for an hour-and-a-half long movie, a 20-minute segment of this film, scooting along at the pace of somebody that's very overweight in a Walmart wheelchair, electronic chair, whatever those things are called, the carts, I don't know. It's at the pace of something like that, and it irks me how just all of a sudden we'll have some weird imagery or something kind of cool, and then it's just like a dream sequence or something stupid like that. Or it's a fake out in another direction, or it's something that you think is fake and then maybe it actually turned out to be real. It's doing the same mistake that Hellseeker did. Of course, Rick Botta being the director, I assume it could be a little bit of that. I didn't look into the writing. I don't really care enough to. I don't care enough to really care talking about it. So, what I'm saying is it's very weak. The script's weak. The execution of this film is so weak compared to Hellseeker, which surprises me tremendously for Rick Botta. I mean, he seemed fairly competent in the previous film for directing and whatever. And if the budget's lower, it's not his fault. But I'm just saying, it's very hard to imagine that this is from the same guy. And Hellseeker's got its flaws, don't get me wrong, but I kind of consider it more positive for me and my taste than I consider it negative, even though it's fairly flawed and weak. What else is there to talk about? I said the movie looks kind of cheap. It really does. You go from Hellseeker and Inferno to this, and it just feels like the lighting isn't right. It feels like it's too bright sometimes, which is fine. It's a different type of movie from the previous two and the previous 6. To be the 7th film in the franchise and direct-to-video, I get it. It's not what Hellraiser deserves. This is really, to me, where they really start to drop the ball. And I get Hellseeker did that too in the way it treats Kirsty in that movie. But really, with this, the way it treats Pinhead, the way it treats the puzzle box, the lore, the weird convoluted supernatural stuff, it's a mess. It's really a giant mess that has a few little highlights, maybe 2 or 3 things in the entire film that I like and I kind of genuinely enjoy. But overall, it's a mess. The CGI, there is quite a bit of practical effects, and when I say that, it's mainly like an amputated hand hanging here or some, like, liquid jello blood pouring out of somebody's wound. There's one really particular scene that pretty much got to me while I watched. It's one of the good things about the movie, involving a knife, and that was pretty neat. It wasn't like a great special effect for practical effects, but it was used well for this movie, you know what I mean? Now, the CGI part though, the non-practical effects, when they're here, especially in the finale, involving kind of a big showdown thing, in numerous amounts of ways, in the final couple of scenes of the movie, it's embarrassing. And I get it's low budget, I get that it's low budget, but I would be embarrassed if I was a studio and put this out, and I had seen the CGI that I introduced at the end of this movie, or even in parts throughout the film. It is such a sloppy amount of CGI in the worst possible way. I think, if anything, the original Hellraiser, as my boy Rambo Raff for Life, one of my favorite YouTubers out there, for all time, basically. If you haven't seen his channel, go check him out. One of the things he said in his review for the original Hellraiser, and Hellraiser 2 even, Hellbound, was how great practical effects look, no matter what age it is, what time it is. If they look good and they look real, they really do something. And even if they're poor looking, they still really do something for a movie. They really charm it up a little bit. And I agree 100%. I think he hit that right on the head, and I think he's right about it. This is a great example of a movie that could have had some of that, and it would have taken a little bit more effort. Maybe there was a time constraint, a budget constraint, whatever, but I cannot see it being cheaper to CGI something like chains into hurting somebody, or tearing somebody apart, or anything weird like that, instead of just using like a cutaway or a very particular skill in directing like I know Rick Bott is capable of because I saw Hellseeker. There are some other ways to come about fixing some of the issues in this movie. And it would have been a lot cheaper if I had done it. You know, it might have not been super satisfying, but it would have been a lot cheaper. Maybe not as cool or as iconic as what some people seem to think of this movie, which is very rare and very far and few between, I think. It's a mess, as I said. The music. As I said about Hellseeker, it's amazing to me how you go from Inferno and that beautiful music, that bluesish, noir crime thriller, very Seven-feeling movie, and the music there, to Hellseeker that had such generic music, when that film's themes and its atmosphere and its eeriness are so much like Inferno. They should have just, and its basically script even, is so much like Inferno, and the twist and everything. They could have just taken that music from Inferno, the Scott Derrickson movie, put it in Hellseeker, and it would have made that movie almost better than what it was. You could have done the same thing with this movie. It didn't change studios, as far as I know. They could have used the Inferno music for all of the direct-to-video sequels, except for Revelations and Judgment, of course. I think they were owned by somebody else, but these first four that came straight to video, they could have really saved them with something like the Inferno music. I guess Inferno was so poorly received by a lot of people, I think, at the time. It really seems to me like people didn't understand what Scott Derrickson was doing. Maybe there's a little bit of the fans being right, honestly, but I think Bloodline was a bigger step away from the franchise than anybody could ever argue. Space is too much. But the music here is so much more generic than in Hellseeker that it really loses Hellraiser. It has no opera-style music at all. It has no fantasy, mysterious, cautionary music. It has nothing like that. It's just your basic fill-in-the-space type of music. It feels royalty-free. It probably is. That's what you're getting here. Hellraiser Deader is bad in so many ways, but I have my few moments I like. I have certain scenes I like, certain performances, like, again, the main girl, I think she's really good. She's not just beautiful, but she's very good in the role. And I think the cult leader is kind of a nice little throwback to Clive Barker, and I don't think the actor was really given a fair shake. He tries some cool things. There's one particular thing I really like before I end this review, and before I rate the movie. It's a train that involves, like, drug addicts and stuff. Yes, it's wild, yes, it's zany, but it's something I've never seen before in any movie or franchise ever. I don't care what we're talking about. I've seen a lot of low-budget trash. I've never seen anything like that, and it was kind of neat. I kind of enjoyed that. But that's it. That's pretty much all I liked about this movie. And the knife scene. That's pretty cool, too. Anyway, when it comes to Hellraiser Deader, which is the next to last film in this particular pack, number 7 of the Hellraiser franchise, if I had to rate this film on a 5-star basis, again, it just barely makes this rating for me. It's almost the bottom of my barrel, but I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 stars. I did not completely hate it, but it's a miserable watch in a bad way. Not in an entertaining way like a Donnie Darko or It's a Wonderful Life that makes you very depressed and also makes you love life. In both of those cases of those movies, 2 of my favorite films of all time, and when I say that, my 2 favorite films of all time is what I mean. It doesn't balance itself out. It doesn't really have anything to kind of make you happier by the end. Not that it has to, but it could have been a little bit of a change-up, I think, for the Hellraiser franchise, even though you have bits of that, like with Hellbound 2, or Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, whatever it's called. You have things like that in there. It could have been better. I think that it's shocking to me how bad this feels. Anyway, 2 out of 5 stars for me for Deader. What do you think about Hellraiser Deader? Again, the 7th film in the franchise. That's a long time for a franchise to be around. So this is a rough one, a very rough one. And I can't believe the kind of quality they dropped when this film came out. And again, here we are moving on to Hellworld, the next review. Haven't watched it yet. Really going to have to take a break and watch something else for the time being. You'll see the Hellworld review when you see it, but for the time being, I'm going to take a break because I need a break. I've been watching these all week. I'm going to watch something different tonight. Anyway, what are your thoughts on everything in Hellraiser Deader? Put it down in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, guys. God bless you all, and goodbye.